It has found that former President Trump sexually abused E. Jean Carroll, which means that they have found him liable for battery. This is a form of sexual assault. Though they did not find that he raped her, this is still a finding of battery and of sexual assault. So this is a win for E. Jean Carroll, but we are still hearing each of the individual questions and the findings from this jury. But this jury has found that former President Trump did sexually abuse E. Jean Carroll and is liable for battery.
We also have the news that the jury has awarded, and this is one of several questions they had to address, was the amount of damages, because this is not a criminal case, this is a civil case, so the punishment in effect is financial, $2 million in damages. Jennifer Rogers still with us. This was one of multiple questions they had to answer, this jury, one of which is whether his conduct constituted rape, sexual abuse, or forcible touching. They came into, I suppose you could call it the middle ground there, sexual abuse here. Can you tell us the significance of that and how you come to that given the standard in a civil trial, which is a preponderance of the evidence as opposed to beyond the reasonable doubt as you would have in a criminal case?
Well, the verdict form gave them these three choices, and it was either rape or sexual assault or unwanted touching, and any of them creates liability. It's just which one they chose would give us more information about what they believed. And she gave evidence of all of them. She said that he had raped her.
They do find him liable for defamation. This is a win for E. Jean Carroll. She has sued in civil court former President Trump for battery and defamation, and she has prevailed on both claims. Now, as you said multiple times, this is not a criminal trial. This is a civil case, so the standards are lower. It is not beyond a reasonable doubt. It's a preponderance of the evidence on battery, but this is really, truly a victory for E. Jean Carroll, and we're getting the total on damages right now.
Our understanding is $2 million in damages for the sexual abuse, close to $3 million, as I understand it, for defamation. And I think we should take a moment here as we cover this, because as we referenced just a few minutes ago, in the span of weeks, a former president indicted on 34 felony counts by a Manhattan DA, this for hush money payments to Stormy Daniels, and now found liable, we should say, not guilty, liable in a civil case for 1, sexual abuse of E. Jean Carroll, and 2, defamation, to the tune of financial damages now approaching $5 million. This is a remarkable moment in U.S. political history. I think we should lay that out quite clearly.
And perhaps not the last moment in the next few months or weeks that we're going to see this president facing potentially more charges in Fulton County, Georgia, and obviously the special counsel investigating Trump's involvement in January 6th and the classified documents case as well. Yep. Let's pivot now to Dave Ehrenberg, who has been standing by for us. Just, Dave, your reaction to this decision, apparently more than $5 million for defamation and battery.
Yeah, I'm not surprised. Now, once they found that Trump did it, then they were going to find that he committed defamation, because afterwards he said he didn't do it, she's a liar. So one went with the other. But as far as the verdict itself, I'm not surprised, because when you saw this very quick verdict, that looked like a quick compromise. Like right away they said, all right, let's just resolve it by splitting the baby, and let's do the second count, which is not rape, but it's something really serious. It requires the touching of a sexual or intimate part of another without that person's consent. And so that is something that's going to be worn as an albatross around the former president's neck throughout the campaign. He can try to say the judge was biased, the jury was biased, but at some point, people are going to be like, wow, this is your candidate for president? Not only has been indicted, but he's been found liable for unwanted sexual touching, sexual assault, essentially, in New York.
Dave, just to be clear, this would be considered, this is not criminal, right? This is civil, but this would be under criminal law if it were considered a sex crime. I mean, that's how serious of a belief this jury has in what happened, even though there are differing views in terms of the severity of what they could have chosen.
Agreed. I've been getting a lot of questions from people of whether he has to register as a sex offender. The answer is no, because it is not a crime, it's a civil matter. And the reason why this was not a crime is because the statute of limitations passed many years ago for this to be a crime. Now, the state of New York passed a special law that says we're going to extend the statute of limitations civilly for matters like this for a special 1-year period. And that's when E.G. Carroll filed. She got in that window. And that's why this is a civil matter, not a criminal matter. But also, she benefited from the fact that she didn't have to prove it beyond a reasonable doubt. She just had to prove it by a preponderance of the evidence. Is it more likely than not that Trump did it? But it still had to be before a unanimous jury. So this is still a very important verdict.
And Gene Casares, to you, I know you have some information because there were these varying degrees of what the jury could have decided about Trump's conduct. Rape, sexual abuse, or forcible touching, obviously different severities here, and they went with that middle one, sexual abuse. That is significant that they did not go with rape, but also significant that they did not go with forcible touching here, as they decided he was liable.
I think it's very interesting because obviously this is a victory for the plaintiffs, no question about it, but E. Jean Carroll testified in great detail of how he raped her, and she immediately called 2 friends and told those friends, he did this to me. This is rape, the friends told her. So there's a lot of testimony in that. This jury did not believe, more likely than not, that rape happened. Now, the prior bad act witnesses, the 2 women testified, they testified to sexual abuse. That's what they testified to. And the strength of those prior bad act witnesses now, I think, really is front and center because that's the point, to show a pattern of conduct. And so those 2 prior bad act witnesses is what the jury went with in relation to the charge that E. Jean Carroll and what her testimony was, that it was sexual abuse. So it's interesting because there is a small quote-unquote win here for Donald Trump that the jury did not believe that there was actual rape. More likely than not, they didn't believe that occurred.
Jennifer Rogers, I wonder, how often do you see cases like this, allegations of sexual abuse tried in a civil court, as opposed to
if they're going to pursue this would go to the police. And then if you were accusing someone of means, perhaps after a criminal case, maybe you would bring a civil case. But this is highly unusual. And as Dave was saying earlier, has to do with the long passage of time. Criminal charges are not available to her. And criminal charges involve a whole other entity, right? The prosecutors. You have to first convince the prosecutors to pursue it, and it has to be beyond a reasonable doubt, so the standards are much more challenging. So this is certainly the unusual way to go about trying to vindicate a sexual assault victim. But it worked for E. Jean Carroll. She said all along that what she really wanted was her day in court, and she got it. And not only that, she won.
And potentially at any moment, she will leave that courthouse and we may hear her speaking directly to cameras. Jennifer, staying with you, I wanted to ask about something that Gene Casares brought up, and that is the testimony of these 2 accusers that had previously accused Trump of sexual assault and sexual harassment, Jessica Leeds and Natasha Stoynoff. They are among, by CNN's count, some 15 different accusers that have historically come forward saying that Donald Trump sexually harassed them. Can you talk about some of the context about these women coming forward and accusing Donald Trump of this over decades now? What does this victory in court for E. Jean Carroll mean for them?
Well, it sort of feels like the Me Too movement with Harvey Weinstein, where, the first accusers never believed, and then as more and more people come forward, there starts to be this snowball effect of people saying, wow, well, if all these people are coming forward, there must really be something to this. And so I think it really did help her to have the testimony of these 2 women. And there's a special provision in the federal rules of evidence that allows this kind of testimony in these kinds of cases. So there's no question that it was appropriately allowed in. And it really, really is crucial. I think the other crucial part, frankly, was the testimony of the 2 friends whom she told immediately about this, because that completely cut the legs out of the argument that she had just made it up recently because she didn't like his politics. And so I thought they were very compelling witnesses, and that helped tip the scales as well.
And to the earlier question, we should note again that she filed her claim under New York's Adult Survivors Act as it's described, which was passed last year expressly to give a short window for survivors to bring civil lawsuits against their perpetrators.
That's right. So while you might normally see someone go to the police in the actually rare instances where they do, in this particular
So we learned that the jury has just been dismissed. The judge has stepped down off the bench. It's unclear if E. Jean Carroll or attorneys for former President Trump will speak to the press outside the courthouse. I would not be surprised if they did so. Look, I was in court earlier today listening to the judge instruct this jury. He gave them explicit instructions on the task in front of them. But again, it took about 90 minutes for him to describe this, and yet they only deliberated for about 2 hours. Now, I've been covering this, been in and out of court, watching this jury. It's a very diverse group of people on this panel. They were all extremely attentive to all of the witnesses as E. Jean Carroll's attorneys tried to establish that her account was not only credible, but that it was supported by a pattern of other accounts, both from other women who alleged similar conduct by former President Trump, as well as the former president's own words from the Access Hollywood tape, where he describes grabbing people, and then also his own deposition, where he doubled down on that. And it's interesting, this jury clearly went through this form very efficiently, came to a unanimous verdict, which has our unanimous consensus here, which is really a win for E. Jean Carroll after several weeks of trial here. And it'll be interesting to see if she addresses people and what her message is, because so often when she was on the stand, former President Trump's lawyers would press her on why she didn't scream, why she didn't fight, why she didn't bring this forward sooner. And she talked a lot about the shame that she felt at the time, how much things have changed post-Me Too. And as you just noted, the reason she's able to bring this case nearly 30 years after the fact is because New York opened a little window for people to bring these kinds of claims, even if the statute of limitations has passed. But it is very difficult to successfully bring these kinds of claims in court because, of course, here you don't have eyewitness testimony. Even if you did, it would be decades old. So this is truly a victory for E. Jean Carroll, and we'll see if she wants to talk about it when she comes out of court any minute.
Yeah, and there was expert
Yeah, Jim, I mean, so the judge began before he read the verdict saying he wanted everyone to have decorum. He didn't want any jumping up and down or any, really verbal reactions. So everyone abided by that. But as the jury, as the judge's law clerk was reading the verdict and that first count finding in Carroll's favor, you could see that she had a sense of relief. She was holding one of her attorney's hands as the verdict was being read, and you could see moments of relief, a smile come across her face. Nothing was audible though from her table or from Trump's attorney's table. And once the verdict was the completed reading and the jury was escorted out, Carroll had another side hug with another one of her lawyers, and then Trump's attorney, Joe Tacopina, walked over to the plaintiff's table. He shook E. Jean Carroll's hand and shook the hands of each of her attorneys. And now we are waiting for them to exit the courthouse to see if either side has a statement. E. Jean Carroll has previously spoken about this case, so I would expect she will say something and address the cameras, but they are taking their time leaving the courtroom today after this trial. We're on our 9th day of the trial, including both the closing and the opening argument.
Kara, sorry to interrupt.